Hey guys, welcome back to more Malicious Compliance HOA stories. In this Ripestories video, it started with a blizzard and an HOA president who treated my private property like her toolbox. She demanded my snowplow, threatened to cut my garage lock, and brought a handyman with bolt cutters. I did not argue, instead I complied and turned it into their downfall. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is titled, Homeowner Association Karen cut my lock to snatch my snowplow. Unaware that I am an ex-cop. So I live on a small plot of land that sits right next to a massive upscale suburban neighborhood. I bought this land 20 years ago when it was nothing but pine trees and dirt roads, and I cleared the spot, built a sturdy modest house and planned to enjoy the quiet life after finishing my time in the military and transitioning into a career in local law enforcement. For 10 years it was paradise, and then a massive development company bought the 200 acres surrounding my property. They chopped down the trees, paved the dirt roads, and built massive luxury homes that all looked exactly the same, and naturally they formed a homeowner association. When the neighborhood was finished, the HOA assumed I would just roll over and join them. However, they were wrong. My property was completely separate from their subdivision. I had my own well, my own septic system, and my driveway connected directly to the main county road through a small easement. I had no legal obligation to join their club, and as a retired cop who spent 20 years dealing with other people's drama, I had zero interest in paying monthly dues to have someone tell me what color I could paint my front door. This didn't sit well with the HOA president though. She was a woman who treated her position like she was the supreme dictator of a small nation. She drove a pristine SUV, and she was notorious for making people's lives miserable. For the sake of this story, we will just call her the tyrant. Over the years, she tried every trick in the book to force me into compliance with the HOA. She sent letters demanding I take down my ham radio antenna. She left notices on my gate complaining that my mailbox didn't match the community aesthetic, and she even called the city to complain that my grass was half an inch too long. I ignored every single one of her complaints. I knew the law inside and out, and I knew she had absolutely zero authority over me or my property. I kept to myself, minded my own business, and focused on my hobbies. One of those hobbies was restoring heavy machinery. My pride and joy was a heavily modified Ford F-350 pickup truck. This was not a standard commuter vehicle. It had a reinforced suspension, massive tires, a custom flatbed, and a commercial-grade hydraulic V-plow mounted on the front. I needed it because my driveway was long and steep, and the winters in our area could be brutal. Anyway, the main event of this story happened in late January. The weather forecasters had been predicting a major snowstorm for days, but nobody expected the absolute whiteout that hit us. We got 3 feet of heavy, wet snow in less than 24 hours, and the wind was howling, the temperatures dropped to single digits, and the entire town was paralyzed. My wife is a charge nurse at the local hospital's emergency room, and in a storm like this, people still get hurt, people still have heart attacks, and the hospital needs its staff. There was no question about whether she was going to work. I woke up at 4 AM, bundled up in my heavy winter gear, and walked out to my detached garage. I fired up the F-350, the diesel engine roared to life, shaking the snow off of the roof. I lowered the massive steel plow and then got to work. It took me a while just to clear my own driveway. The snow was incredibly dense, but the truck handled it beautifully. Once I hit the main county road, I realized the city plows had not made it out to our side of town yet. The road was impassable for a normal car. I spent another hour pushing snow off the main road, creating a clear path all the way to the highway, which had been treated and plowed by the state trucks. So I drove back home, picked up my wife, and safely delivered her to the emergency room doors. On my way back, I noticed a few elderly neighbors who lived on the county road trying to shovel their driveways. I dropped the plow and cleared them out in minutes. I'm not a commercial plowing service though, but I believe in helping out when things get tough. By the time I got back to my house, the sun was coming up, and that's when I noticed the absolute disaster happening in the HOA subdivision. The HOA roads are private, I assume, because seemingly the city doesn't plow them. The HOA hires their own private snow removal contractors, and apparently the cheap company the tyrant had hired decided the storm was too severe and completely bailed on them. The entire luxury neighborhood was now buried under 3 feet of snow. Nobody could get out of their driveways even, and nobody could navigate the streets, and they were completely trapped. I parked my truck in my garage, closed the doors, locked them with a padlock, and went inside to make a pot of coffee. I was sitting in my kitchen, sipping my coffee and watching the news when I saw movement on my security cameras. Someone was trudging up my freshly plowed driveway. It was the HOA president. She was wearing a thick winter coat, but her face was red from the cold, and she looked furious. I put my mug down, walked to the front door, and opened it before she could even knock. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "You need to get back in that truck right now," she demanded, pointing a gloved finger at my garage. "The entire neighborhood is snowed in. Our contractor cancelled. You have a plow. It's your community duty to clear our streets immediately." I looked at her, genuinely amazed by her audacity. She had spent 5 years harassing me already, trying to find me and reporting me to the city for imaginary code violations, but now she wanted me to bail her out. "I am not a commercial plowing company," I told her simply. "I'm not even injured to plow private neighborhood roads. If my blade catches a hidden curb or if I slide on the ice and hit one of those expensive cars parked under the snow, I'm personally liable for thousands of dollars in damages. The answer is no." Her face turned a deeper shade of red and she said, "This is an emergency. People cannot get to work. You have the equipment and you're gonna use it. I'm the tyrant of this community and I'm ordering you to clear those roads." "I am not part of the HOA," I reminded her. "Your orders mean absolutely nothing to me. You should have hired a better contractor. But now please get off my property before I call the local precinct and report you for trespassing on private property." I then closed the door in her face and locked it. I watched on the cameras as she stood there for a full minute, stomping her feet in the snow, before turning around and marching back down my driveway. I figured that was the end of it. I went back to my coffee and enjoyed a quiet morning. Around noon, the snow finally stopped falling. I went outside to clear the walkway leading up to my porch. Taped to my front door, though, was an official HOA notice. I pulled it off the door and read it. It was, without a doubt, the most unhinged document I'd ever seen. Here's a summary of what she had written. Number 1. Declaration of emergency. The document claimed that the neighborhood was under an official HOA state of emergency due to the weather. Next, requisition of assets. It cited a completely fabricated section of their bylaws claiming that during an emergency, the HOA board had the legal authority to requisition any and all heavy equipment located within the immediate vicinity for community safety. The ultimatum, it demanded that I surrender the keys to my truck and plow to the HOA maintenance team by 5 p.m. They intended to have their neighborhood handyman operate my truck to clear their streets. Next, the actual threat. The final paragraph stated that if I refused to hand over the keys to them or if I locked the equipment away, the HOA would view this as a hostile act endangering the community, and they explicitly stated they would authorize their maintenance team to bypass any locks and secure the equipment by force if necessary. I stood on my porch and read the notice 3 times. I couldn't believe what I was holding. She was actually threatening to break into my garage and steal my truck, and she had even put the threat in writing. As a former police officer, I know how the law works and I know what constitutes a crime. What she was threatening was burglary, grand theft auto, and destruction of property. But that is when the idea for malicious compliance hit me. She demanded access to my truck. She warned me that she would cut my locks if I tried to stop her. She wanted to requisition my equipment for her handyman to use. I decided I was going to give her exactly what she asked for. I was going to comply with her demands, literally and technically, and let her walk into a trap of her own making. Well, first I went back inside and sat down at my computer. I typed an email to the official HOA board address, ensuring there was a digital paper trail of our communication. I kept my response very formal, very clear, and very compliant. My email read, "I've received your written notice demanding access to my snow removal equipment. As I've stated previously, I'm not a member of your association. I will not plow your roads. However, regarding your demand to requisition my vehicle, I will comply with your directive to not dispute your access. I will leave the truck parked in my garage, and I will leave the keys inside the vehicle. I will not physically interfere with your maintenance team if they come onto my property to take it. Please be explicitly warned though, you assume all legal, physical and financial liability for any actions you take regarding my property. The vehicle is specialized equipment. If you choose to take it, you do so entirely at your own risk." I hit send. I had officially warned her, and I had officially told her I would not stop her. Next, I went out to the garage to prepare the bait. My garage is a detached, sturdy wooden structure. I rummaged through my tool drawers until I found what I was looking for. It was a cheap, flimsy brass lock that I used for a gym locker years ago. The shackle was incredibly thin, and I slipped the cheap lock through the latch on the garage doors and clicked it shut. From a distance, it looked like a standard locked door, and up close you could break it with a heavy rock, so that way it would be easy to get in for a thief. Inside the garage, I prepped the truck, but then I armed my secret weapon. Because I put a lot of money into restoring this truck, I installed a high-end aftermarket security system. It features live GPS tracking and, more importantly, a remote engine immobilizer. This system is connected directly to my phone and tablet. With the push of a button on an app, I can cut the fuel pump and kill the ignition system. Once the immobilizer is triggered, the truck is completely dead. It can't be hotwired, it cannot be restarted with a key, and it cannot be bypassed without the master code. I pulled out my phone, opened the app, and ran a quick diagnostic test. The system showed a strong signal. The immobilizer was ready, and finally, I checked my security cameras. I got a comprehensive system wired around my house. I got 2 cameras covering the driveway, 1 covering the front of the garage, and a hidden camera mounted inside the garage pointing directly at the truck. I verified that all cameras were recording in 4K with clear audio. The trap was set. I'd complied with her demand to leave the equipment accessible, and I'd warned her of the liabilities. All I had to do now was wait, and I didn't sleep much that night. I stayed up in my living room, keeping an eye on the camera feeds on my tablet, and the neighborhood was dead silent, buried under the snow. At 5:45 a.m., my driveway motion sensors chimed softly. I sat up and stared at the screen. The night vision cameras illuminated 2 figures walking slowly up my driveway. Even in the grainy black and white footage, I recognized them immediately. Of course, it was the HOA president and the neighborhood handyman, a guy named Ralph, who usually just changed light bulbs at the clubhouse and yelled at kids for skateboarding. Ralph was carrying a large pair of bright yellow bolt cutters, and I watched mesmerized by their absolute foolishness as they walked right up to my garage. The audio feed kicked in too. "Cut it quickly," the tyrant whispered loudly. "We need to get the roads cleared before people wake up and start complaining." "Are you sure about this?" Ralph asked, sounding nervous. "This is his private garage. This feels like breaking and entering." "It's an emergency requisition," she snapped back. "I left him the notice. He knows we are taking it. I got the authority. Just cut the lock." Ralph sighed, lifted the bolt cutters, and clamped them over the cheap brass lock, and with one squeeze, the flimsy shackles snapped and the lock fell into the snow. They had just committed forced entry and destruction of private property. Ralph pulled the doors open, and they both stared at the massive F-350 sitting in the dark. "Get in and start it," she ordered, and Ralph climbed up into the driver's seat. The interior camera caught him looking around the cab. "The keys are right here," he called out, sounding surprised. "See, I told you," the tyrant says, a tone of smug victory in her voice. "He knows that he cannot defy the HOA. He left them for us. And now start the engine." Ralph turned the key. The massive diesel engine roared to life. He flipped the switch for the headlights, illuminating the driveway. "Careful with the blade," she yelled over the engine noise. "Just back it out and turn towards the main neighborhood entrance." Ralph put the truck in reverse and then slowly backed out of my garage. The tyrant scurried out of the way, watching triumphantly as the massive snowplow rolled down my driveway. They had just committed Grand Theft Auto. I stood up, picked up my tablet and walked to my front window. I watched the real-time action outside. Ralph backed the truck to the end of my driveway and turned the steering wheel, pointing the heavy V-plow towards the snow-covered street of the luxury subdivision. The tyrant jogged down the driveway to follow him, and Ralph shifted into drive and hit the gas. The truck lurched forward, the heavy blade biting into the 3 feet of snow blocking the road. He managed to push forward exactly 50 feet, effectively positioning the massive truck completely sideways across the entrance to their street, and I looked down at my tablet, opened the security app, and pressed a red button labeled Immobilize. Outside, the roar of the diesel engine vanished instantly, the headlights died and the cab lights went dark. The truck stopped dead in its tracks, a frozen monolith of steel blocking the entire road. I watched on the camera feed as Ralph frantically twisted the key in the ignition. Nothing happened though, the engine would not even crank. The tyrant ran up to the driver's side window. "What are you doing?" she yelled. "Keep going, you gotta clear the road." "It died," Ralph yelled back, panic rising in his voice. "I don't know what happened, everything just shut off." "It won't even start." "Well, fix it," she screamed, hitting the side of the door. "Turn the key again." "I'm turning it, it's completely dead." They were stuck there. They had stolen a 5-ton truck, driven it 50 feet, and were now stranded in the freezing cold, blocking their own neighborhood. It was time to make a phone call. I picked up my cell phone and dialed the direct non-emergency line for the local police precinct. After 20 years on the police force, I knew the dispatchers and I knew the shift supervisors and I knew how to report a crime accurately, obviously. The dispatcher answered, "Precinct 7, how can I help you?" "Hey Sarah, it's OP. I said calmly. "I need to report a burglary, vandalism and an ongoing vehicle theft at my address." "OP, seriously?" She asked, her tone shifting to professional concern. "Are you in danger? Are the suspects still on scene?" "I'm perfectly safe," I replied. And yes, the suspects are currently sitting inside my stolen vehicle approximately 50 feet from my front porch. The vehicle is immobilized. Send a couple patrol units whenever they are available. No rush, the suspects are not going anywhere. Units are rolling, stay inside OP, she said. I hung up, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee and went back to the window to watch the show. It took about 20 minutes for the police to arrive. Because the main county road was clear, they actually made it in a good time. 2 patrol SUVs pulled up to the end of my driveway. Ralph and Tyrant were still arguing next to a dead truck, and when they saw the flashing blue and red lights reflecting off the snow, Ralph froze. The Tyrant immediately puffed up her chest, preparing to exert her imaginary authority. 2 officers stepped out of their vehicle. They were bundled in their winter coats, hands resting casually near their duty belts. "Step away from the vehicle," the taller officer commanded, shining a heavy flashlight towards them. "Officers, thank goodness you are here," the Tyrant announced, marching towards them with her hands raised in a calming gesture. "This is an HOA emergency. We requisitioned this snow removal equipment to clear the roads, but the owner deliberately sabotaged it. I need you to order him to come out here and fix it immediately." The officers stopped and looked at her, clearly confused by the sheer nonsense she was spewing. "Ma'am, we received a report of a stolen vehicle and a burglary at this address," the second officer said. "Do you own this truck?" "No, it belongs to the man who lives in that house." She pointed at my front door. "But I am the HOA president. Under our emergency bylaws, we have the right to secure equipment for the safety of the neighborhood. He was warned." I decided it was time to make my appearance. I put my coat on, stepped out onto my front porch and walked down my cleared driveway towards the officers. I said, "Morning, officers," I called out. The taller officer squinted, recognizing me. "OP, this is your truck?" "Sure is," I said, holding up my tablet, "and I have the registration inside as well." I also got a high-definition video of these 2 individuals trespassing on my property and using bolt cutters to destroy my padlock and entering my closed garage and driving my vehicle away without my permission. "He knew we were taking it," the Tyrant shrieked, pointing a finger at me. "He sent me an email saying he would leave it in the garage and would not stop us. He left the keys in the cup holder. This is entrapment." The taller officer looked at me. "Is that true, OP?" "Well, I did send her an email," I confirmed smoothly. I informed her that I would not physically fight her if she attempted to take my property, but I also explicitly warned her in writing that she assumed all legal liability for her actions. Leaving my truck unlocked in my own closed garage doesn't really give anyone the legal right to cut a lock, break in and steal it. I tapped the screen on my tablet, pulled up the video, and I handed it to the officer. The 2 patrolmen watched the crisp, clear footage of Ralph snapping the lock, opening the doors and driving the truck away. They listened to clear audio of the Tyrant ordering him to do it. The taller officer handed the tablet back to me. He turned to the Tyrant, his expression completely flat. "Ma'am, turn around and place your hands behind your back." Her jaw dropped. "Excuse me? You cannot arrest me. I'm the president of this HOA. I have legal authority here." "We had a requisition order. Your HOA rules do not supersede state law," the officer stated firmly, pulling out his handcuffs. "You have committed burglary, grand theft auto, and destruction of property. Turn around." Ralph, realizing how bad things had gotten, immediately threw his hands in the air and backed away from the truck. "She told me it was legal," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "She said she had the paperwork and I just do what the board tells me." "I did not want to steal anything. Save it for the judge," the second officer said, moving to secure Ralph. The Tyrant began to physically resist, pulling her arms away and screaming about her rights, lawsuits and my supposed sabotage. This earned her a harsher grip from the officer, who quickly secured the cuffs around her wrists. "He sabotaged the truck," she yelled as they walked her towards the patrol SUV. "He purposely broke it so we could get stuck." I smiled, holding up my phone. "I did not break anything, it's a remote immobilizer. I pushed a button to stop my stolen vehicle from leaving the scene of the crime." To prove my point, I tapped the app again. The truck's headlights instantly flickered back on and the dashboard lit up. The Tyrant let out an incoherent screech of rage as the officer gently pushed her into the backseat of the cruiser and shut the door. The officers took my formal statement on the spot. I emailed them copies of her ridiculous notice, my compliant email response and all the video files. They had a perfectly wrapped case already now, complete with a confession caught on camera and the suspects apprehended inside the stolen vehicle. Because the truck was blocking the road, I offered to move it back to my garage. The officers thanked me and I drove my F350 in reverse, parking it safely back inside. The neighborhood remained snowed in until late that afternoon when a massive county loader finally came through and cleared the main path. The fallout was awesome. The HOA president faced multiple felony charges, burglary and grand theft auto carry serious weight, and because she used bolt cutters she was even in more trouble. Ralph took a plea deal immediately, agreeing to testify against her in exchange for lesser misdemeanor charges. He told the investigators that she had been planning to confiscate my truck for weeks, looking for any excuse to exert her dominance. The HOA board, terrified of being implicated in a criminal conspiracy, held an emergency meeting later. They formally removed her from her position, rescinded all her ridiculous emergency requisition policies, and issued a formal written apology to me. They also agreed to cover the cost of my destroyed padlock, though I told them to keep their $5. As part of her pre-trial release conditions, she was ordered to have no contact with me or my property, but eventually she accepted a plea deal to avoid jail time, and she was hit with heavy fines, years of probation, and a permanent felony record that effectively ended her career in whatever corporate middle management job she had held. And the next one is a malicious compliance story, which is titled, "Boss said I cannot just disappear from my desk, so now I send him a message every time I leave." So for some context, we had a team meeting where my boss said people are just getting up and disappearing without telling anyone, and that it is unprofessional. So now I message him on Teams every single time. Stepping away for the restroom, gonna grab coffee, print or run. I don't wait for a response, I just let him know. Last week, I sent him 9 messages in one day, and on Friday he replied, "You don't need to tell me every time you move." And I said, "Just wanted to make sure I'm being professional, just like you asked me." He has not brought it up since then. And yeah guys, thanks for watching, I will see you again tomorrow.